Welcome to Zen Money Monday, weekly conversations with innovators, thought leaders, and entrepreneurial junkies about building good businesses, exploring what the idea of Zen money really means, and how to achieve it. With your host, author, business strategist, and Zen Money CFO, Liz LaJoy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Zen Money Monday. If you missed last week's episode, I had a really fun conversation with Alex Steed, who's a co-founder of Knack Factory, which is a video production company based in Portland, Maine. We got into a lot of interesting stuff about what it's like to run a business as a creative person, somebody who doesn't consider themselves a business person being in business, and why killing our ego is the number one most important I was going to say trait, but really it's ability, skill set that we need to learn as business owners and entrepreneurs to really be successful. If you want to check out that episode, you can go to zenmoneymap.com/046 to catch it. And right now, this week, I want to talk about financial schooling. So in the LaJoy house, everyone has gone back to school, my husband included, as a science teacher at the local high school. We are handling COVID like everyone else is, but our kids are in class right now. So it's been an interesting transition this past week or two, thinking about what education really means. And for those of you who don't know, I was a teacher in a former life. I ran away to the Czech Republic when I was 27 to teach English as a foreign language for about a year. And that was a really interesting experience. And I sometimes forget how much teaching is a really important piece of my life and something that I really, really enjoy. And so for the past year or so, we've really been focused here at the Zen Money Initiative on serving our long-term clients, helping them grow their businesses, and our programs and learning opportunities have really kind of taken a back seat. And so in the past few months, I've been feeling the need to talk about it a little bit more. And so today I really wanted to just discuss something that isn't as ticky-tacky as what I usually get into, and that is around this interesting thing that happens when we think about how we learn about money. Because many of us, I would say the vast majority of us, learn about money kind of backwards, or our parents think we're going to learn it through osmosis. And a lot of what we learn begins very early on, maybe at the age of 6, 7, 8, is usually when we have our earliest money memory. And a lot of times that's just from watching the people around us. So I've had friends and colleagues who say, oh my gosh, my biggest money memory is watching my mom writing out checks for the utility bill or the rent check and being, having to stagger payments and pay attention to the calendar to make sure that things aren't going to bounce, right? That's one version of financial learning. And in that case, you might walk away feeling like there's never enough money, that it's a struggle, that the money situation in your life is something you want but can't have, right? There's all kinds of stories that go around. And along with these early age realities around money, I've had other people say, well, I remember my first money memory was my grandfather giving me a $5 bill, and that felt amazing. And, I got to decide what to do with it, and I felt very empowered. Right. So it doesn't always have to mean a negative thing. But for many of us, our financial education wasn't particularly systematic, myself included. And I think there's a disservice that we do to our young people in our cultures these days around not identifying, what's meaningful education around finances and what might trip our kids up. Right. So it's an interesting thing. And as entrepreneurs, a lot of these old stories come and bite us in the butt. What do I mean by that? I mean, we carry all this stuff, whether it's that there isn't enough money or that we don't have good spending habits or that, like so many people come up to me and say behind their hands, oh, I'm the worst ever at ... Well, how did we get to a point where we had that belief about ourselves, right? So we kind of have this partial understanding of I should probably be making more money than I'm spending. That's a basic financial equation situation. And we know that in our gut. We know that inherently, even if you identify as a creative person or somebody who's not numbers oriented, that is a real truism. And we know that kind of in the core of our being. That being said, as we get into business ownership and entrepreneurship, right, this money conversation becomes really, really under a microscope. We're in a crucible around this because we want to make money. We need to make money in many cases, right? We've maybe made the leap from a more secure traditional job. We may have to prove to ourselves and our spouses and the people around us that we can sustain this new adventure. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just about the ticky-tacky, what numbers are coming in, what numbers are going out the door, although that is an important piece of our financial education, how to understand that flow. But there's this other emotional piece that we all feel. And a lot of times you might go to a money coach to deal with that, or you want to address this feeling of discomfort. Many people I know like to, work on the concept of power of attraction. Whatever it is, it all stems from feeling really uncomfortable when it comes to money. So we want it. We don't want to look at it too closely. Maybe thinking about it creates a really, visceral discomfort in your body. Many people feel like a millstone is hanging around their neck when they consider the level of debt that they have, or they're worried about, can I even ask for pricing? And I'm sitting here with a potential client and it makes me want to throw up a little, right? This is all stuff that if we don't address it head on in one way or another can keep us from really growing. And so financial education, from my point of view, can take a lot of different forms, right? So we learn accidentally by watching our parents. We learn accidentally by watching our friends. As we get older, maybe we start to get a sense of like, oh, maybe they deal with money a little differently in that household than we do in my household. And we start to develop a sense for ourselves of what we would like our financial reality to be. Fast forward to being an adult, again, we carry a lot of that old stuff with us, and we might open our doors. We might go heavily into debt to do so. We might continue that debt rolling forward as we grow. I know people who have, gotten to the point of making, high six figures, low seven figures, and are still kind of always rolling forward, to the next thing. I'm going to do another big launch, and that'll make the money I need to clear all this stuff I'm kind of dragging behind me from a negative financial standpoint. And from my perspective, that's an ongoing cycle that isn't ever going to be broken unless we cognizantly sit down and say, all right, I need to do some learning around this. And in my opinion, it's twofold. So, the work that we do with clients, on the one hand, some of it is very, as I say, ticky-tacky, i.e., what needs to happen when? What kind of reports do you need to send into the government? What does, an accounting system truly look like? What does it mean to have to keep receipts? What does it mean to tie out your books and reconcile them? These are all very kind of practical, tactical tools and understanding. But secondary to that, you as the business owner also need to just understand kind of that bigger picture, right? If I pull a lever here financially, i.e. raise my prices, for example, what could the ramifications of that be? And this is where really strategizing our potential can create a much greater sense of security. It can give you sort of guardrails to be thinking about your potential financially. So if you're looking ahead, and this is where a lot of us like to play, right? We're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to create this new offer. I'm going to sell it for X thousands of dollars. If I bring in 4 people a month, then I'll have this much money in my pocket and this will be great. That feels really fun. I would love to encourage you, again, about financial education, just thinking about that in a kind of a, like, what's a baseline? What's the plus version? What's the ultimate version? Because again, then you have some structure to be able to think, all right, what's my worst case scenario? How do I get comfortable with that? That's an important thing from financial education. We need to educate ourselves in terms of where our own comfort levels are, because as you know, your version of risk and risk tolerance is going to be different than anybody else's. And sometimes I think we look at this entrepreneurial space, this business space, thinking that it's kind of one size fits all, and it really is not. So, when we work with people, it's really my goal to figure out what feels best to you. So I've had clients who are like, what, I feel best when I have multiple tens of thousands of dollars of cash sitting in my checking account. And I know that will, if nothing else comes in the door, that will last me in my business, i.e. my business expenses are paid and I can, draw down and live off of that for 6 to 8 months. That feels really awesome to them. I have other people who cannot live in that space because it doesn't motivate them. Having savings isn't meaningful for them. So the other part of financial education is just understanding yourself and recognizing that there is no one cookie cutter version. There certainly are, if we can strip away the emotion, there are ways to say, okay, I'm going to track from point A, where I am today, to point B, where I want to be in a year, to point C, where I want to be in 3 years, to point D, where I want to be in 5 years. But the reality is life is way more, amorphous, what is the word I'm looking for here? More malleable than that. And things pop up. Our interests change and shift. And so, we need to have a plan that can also change and shift with you. But at the core of it, you need to feel comfortable driving those decisions and driving those orientations in your business, new initiatives, whatever it might be. So again, back to financial education, I'm impressed by how much of our understanding and or lack of understanding comes from the very real fact that in many of our cultures, there is not an honest, open, concise, stripped away emotionally conversation about money learning. Does it really happen in the school? It often is, very sporadic in the home, if at all. And so these repetitions continue generation after generation, and it becomes very apparent as you get older, I think, that if we want to break out of those cycles, we've got to step back and give ourselves some time to learn about this. And I think it's just fascinating to me because, again, we want to make money, but many of us don't want to spend time learning about it. And it doesn't have to take a whole lot of time. And the benefit of learning about it is that we stop being so emotionally entwined with it because it's easier to just see it as data and information and money being a tool as opposed to sort of this turgid relationship, like the bad high school relationship that you love but hate at the same time. I would love, if you're feeling that way, for you to consider that a little bit of time spent facing this in discomfort may actually ultimately get you to a much bigger and better space. And what's interesting about this is that the people who really dig in and say, I got to deal with this stuff, I've got to learn about this more, I've got to understand what it takes to really drive a business forward versus I'm just kind of making decisions off this, on the fly, and hope that it all works for the best and not really having mapped this out financially, is that you do end up getting where you want to go more quickly, more effectively, and with a lot less stress. So that's my stump speech for today around financial education. I just think it is incredibly important to understand, dig in a little bit more, because what happens, or what can happen, is that we give our power away. We say, well, my bookkeeper is taking care of that. And we assume it's all going well until it's not. I'll give you an example. I am currently onboarding a new CFO level client, and she had been having her VA take care of her bookkeeping. Now, her VA told her that she knew what she was doing. This new client didn't really know how to vet that and thought that everything was basically okay and wouldn't really need a lot of cleanup. And I got in there and realized that nothing had been reconciled for the past 3 years. We had to make an adjustment just to get to correct beginning balances for this year of almost $20,000, right? Luckily, that was $20,000 in her favor, but it could have easily gone the other way. And she would have been caught short saying, oh shit, I have to pay taxes on something because my books weren't put together correctly. There were duplications in income, duplications in expenses. Like, it was just easy mistakes to make if you don't quite know what you're doing, as is the case with this particular VA. So my takeaway from that is that it's still our responsibility as the business owners to understand enough to know how to vet somebody and see if they really know what they're doing. Again, you don't need to become an expert in double entry bookkeeping or accounting or tax work, but we need to understand how it's supposed to work. And we need to be able to be the checks and balances person. We have to be the literal buck stops here person, because it is your money and it's your hard, time spent in the trenches making all this happen. And if we pass that responsibility off to somebody else without having a baseline understanding and knowledge base for ourselves, this kind of stuff can happen. And if that's happened to you, or if you feel like you might be in that case, I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm really not. Because again, many, many things can get cleaned up. I'm just continually flabbergasted by how many people out there feel like they know what they're doing in terms of financial management, particularly for other people in these supporting roles. And they really don't have any more education than most people. And then the systems make it seem like they're doing it right. But if you don't have an extra level of understanding, things are going to get entered improperly. Your totals aren't going to really tie out. And at the end of the day, what's actually sitting in your bank account doesn't match what your accounting system says. And if you don't have somebody looking at that regularly, if you're not looking at that regularly, then you can go years and years and have to spend a lot of money to clean it up. Or at the very least, feel like, oh shit, I was supposed to know better. And my biggest thing about understanding and feeling good about our finances from an education standpoint is recognizing, let's not beat ourselves up about what happened in the past, because from what I've seen, we all have money demons, money monsters in our closets of one form or another. And that might be debt. It might be just generally feeling at sea about all of it. It might be all kinds of different things. But at the end of the day, we all have them. Let's just recognize that, be kind to ourselves in this process of learning. And overall, remember that our goal here is to level up. And so as entrepreneurs and business owners, I think there's sort of a criteria of interest in learning to really be excited about, starting your own business and getting out there in the world in a different way. You have to be a really curious person. You have to be interested in teaching yourself new things, in opening yourself up to having other people teach you and coach you. And we're really good at accepting that in many areas of our business: marketing, advertising, hiring, operations management. But for some reason, it's awfully hard sometimes to open the door to learning around our money, which again, if we just strip away the emotion of that, is kind of a fascinating situation. Like, what is going on there exactly? So take a minute this week and just think about whether you have the tools and resources you need to feel supremely confident about your money management. If you do, fantastic. I hope that also means you have some people in your life who are helping you with this. Or if you're a particular archetype that loves to do this yourself in terms of like tracking your numbers and doing all of that fun stuff, great. Let's just make sure that you're feeling consciously confident around all of it. And if you find yourself saying, I really, yeah, okay, maybe it's time to level up. And a lot of times we get into business and maybe we're even 3-4 years in and finally we say, oh, okay, this is the area that I need to focus on next, because I can now see that I can't get to the next level until I, get this sorted out and have another layer of kind of understanding under my belt. So whatever your circumstances, just think through that, identify where you're actually at, and start thinking through what might help you get to the next level. So I hope that's helpful. And I hope this wasn't too preachy. I find this a fascinating conversation, and one that we need to continue having in terms of why does it feel not so great around learning about money, as well as even just handling it. So that's it for this week. I hope that's great food for thought. It's a topic that we will continue to be talking about, but as it stands now, September is a good time to think about going back to school, and let's make sure that you're feeling really strong in your financial foundation from an education, knowledge-based learning standpoint, as well as actually making a bunch of money. Would you like to get into this conversation a little bit more live? We have started Zen Money Chats, where I am going live on Facebook on our business page on Wednesdays at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time to talk about this week's topic and any other questions that you bring to the table. So we'll put a link in the show notes, but if you want to scoot on over and look up Zen Money Initiative or the @ handle of Zen Money CFO, I'd love to see you there and hear what you've got going on in real time. And be sure to tune in next week. I'm going to be speaking with Jody Gallant of JMG Marketing. She has extensive experience building multiple kinds of businesses. She has a really interesting story, and we are going to dive into that along with her insights around what it takes to be a good business owner next week. So stay tuned. Hey, do you want to start taking this all to the next level? I have a brand new free masterclass that I'm offering this month in September 2020. It is called How to Maximize Your Momentum, 6 Simple Steps to Zen Money Mastery. If you want to join me, there will be 3 different days, all live. You can get your Q&A answered. We will stick on until everybody has their questions taken care of. And in the process, hopefully you can start mapping your version of Zen Money. Just go to zenmoneymap.com/masterclass September 2020. I will put links in the show notes so you can just click and join. I hope to see you there.